everyone, it's Emily and I'm back with another 3DS collection update. So the last one I did was back in August where I shared what my current collection looks like and what my kind of thought process was moving forward and what titles I really wanted to grab before the inevitable eShop closure and the continuing rising market prices. Since that video, I have picked up quite a few titles, as you'll see here. And these past few months, I have been able to really kind of round off my collection overall and kind of leave it at a place where I'm happy that I was able to grab so many titles I was interested in and wanted to eventually play. And I'm sort of at the point right now with 65 titles that I'm trying to decide whether or not I should kind of leave off 3DS collecting for a while and shift my focus to other systems. So in addition to 3DS collecting, I'm a very big Switch collector. I've been slowly trying to pick up my collecting for the PS Vita, the original Nintendo DS system, as well as the PS4 and PS5. And I've been sort of contemplating whether or not to pick up the PSP recently, since I am really into portable handhelds. So that of course is quite a number of different systems, and I've been also sort of contemplating whether or not to buy a few in-box copies of Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games from some of my favorite franchises, more as display pieces rather than to actually play. Those are of course very expensive, especially the titles I'm considering. All that's sort of been in the back of my mind of things that I might want to prioritize over some of the other 3DS titles that I don't have in my collection yet. So in sort of shifting my focus away from a 3DS, these were the last two titles that I've picked up recently. I will go into some other titles that I might pick up eventually, but they're not going to be priorities for me at this point, I don't think. So the first one is a pretty standard title that I've just been putting off getting, and that is Animal Crossing New Leaf. Back in its heyday, this was a very popular title. And my first Animal Crossing was actually New Horizons on the Switch during the height of the pandemic when all my friends were playing. And I'm not really one for social or multiplayer games, but I did get pretty immersed in that game for at least, I would say, the first 6 months. So I do see myself dabbling in this game at least a little bit, since I do like how charming Animal Crossing is, and I've just heard really good things about New Leaf in particular, and how you're the mayor of your town, and it just seems a bit more of a personal touch when it comes to you and all the villagers on your island and whatnot. So be interested to see at least how this differs from New Horizons, which I'm gonna be honest, I haven't picked that up since 2020. The other game that I picked up that I'm really excited about actually is One Piece Romance Dawn, and this has the holographic cover and it is numbered. So this originally came out with 16,800 North American copies, and I believe it was sold on the Bandai Namco store exclusively. I might be wrong. So One Piece has come up on this channel quite a bit. It is my favorite anime manga franchise, and it's one that I started actually back in grad school after a friend kind of introduced me to it, and I've since been catching up and watching and reading everything on my own. I'm not quite caught up yet. I'm still in the middle of the Wano Country arc, but I've been really enjoying it, and I really wanted to pick this up because it is a special piece, I would say, for the 3DS system. I've heard not the best things when it comes to the actual game, but I think if you are a fan of this franchise, you'll at least enjoy the game, so I definitely not at least enjoy it. Let's see kind of all the characters and what the side story is. So from my understanding, this game isn't really canon, but should be a fun time, I think. So I bought this used on the Mercari app, so it's not in the best condition, but I'm still pretty happy with how it looks, and I'm excited to display this cover. But I was able to get this for a pretty good deal. So usually my upper limit for 3DS games are like in the 60 range. I try not to go beyond that unless I have gift cards or some other promotional credit. Mercari US had this campaign where if you listed, I think, 10 items in a certain category, they would give you a $20 coupon off of 50. So I ended up paying $55 plus shipping for this. So just under that $60 mark, which is sort of my upper limit for 3DS games at the moment. So now I'm going to transition into, I guess, the theme of this video, which is at what point do we decide to stop collecting for a certain system? And I want to sort of pose this question to you all, and sort of what your thought process is when it comes to collecting, since I know that this is probably something that a lot of us collectors do contemplate, especially if we're juggling a ton of different systems at one time, and also keeping up with new releases, which there have been so many. So I guess I'll go into a little bit of detail about my thought process when it comes to putting the 3DS on pause at the moment. So for me, it's both a matter of price and quantity. I could think of a handful of games that I would love to own. I could think of 5 right now. So most of these games are really difficult to find for under $100. And so they're not really ones that I want to, I guess, prioritize at this moment because of all the other systems that I'm currently collecting and thinking of getting in the future. There is one other game that is really cheap, actually, so I do want to get Codename Steam at some point, since it is by Intelligent Systems, who does Fire Emblem. So I wanted to get it, even though I've heard mixed reviews. Some people love it, some people didn't like it at all. So I do want to get it, and you could easily find that for under $10 still. So I might grab it one of these days. It's just, again, not a priority at the moment, because I think out of the 65 titles that I own right now, I've only really played a quarter of them, which is a really low percentage. And I don't even want to go into the ratio of which Switch games I played and haven't played yet, because that one's honestly a little bit worse. So I started collecting for the 3DS system when A Link Between Worlds came out, since that was the game that got me back into gaming. And at the time I was a grad student and had very little disposable income. So I was only able to buy a handful of games every year until when I graduated in 2020. And so that's when I started really amping up my collecting, because I felt this urgency of grabbing as many titles before they started to disappear and just soar up in prices, as we were seeing during the height of the pandemic with so many different systems. And so I definitely got caught up in that, which I do not regret, because I was able to grab a lot more titles than I probably would have if I started later. But that did leave me again with that very small playing percentage versus what I had amassed in my collection. I know that there's a lot of other titles that probably won't end up in my collection, mostly because while they do sound really interesting, and I know a lot of you have recommended them to me, so they must be still good games. It's really hard for me to just picture myself playing them within the next 5 years, if I'm being honest. So putting a pause on my current 3DS collection and not picking up those last handful of games that either interested me or that I've been recommended might come to bite me in the back, years to come, because who knows what's going to happen with the market and how easy it'll be to come by physical 3DS games. But I think it's always good to step back from a collection that you've been working on for so many years and just question, is this enough? There is, I think, a fine line between hoarding and collecting. And I know I've been kind of straddling that line for quite a bit for certain systems. And also with just all that kind of pressure that we've been experiencing as collectors when it comes to this urgency of buying limited games and seeing games go out of print. So it's a lot to balance and juggle around. And it's been something that I've been trying to be a bit more, I guess, mindful of, because even if finances were not really an issue on this, I still really like the idea of having a very curated collection with games that I know that I will love just to be on my shelf. But anyway, I didn't want this video to be too philosophical when it comes to collecting and I guess mindfulness, and there's so many other topics within this that I didn't get into that you guys are free to talk about in the comments if you like. But I guess I wanted to again pose this question to you guys. At what point would you consider a collection complete? I think it's something that is good to at least talk about and think about. Because as much fun as it is to do all the research and finding the great deals and just amassing a really great catalog of games on our shelf, there is always going to be this balance of not getting too caught up in that, which I know I have, and probably you guys have seen on this channel. Collections will always be subjective and relative to the individual, so everyone's definition of collecting and their purpose for collecting always differ. So again, I would just love to hear what you guys have to say, and also specifically, how is your 3DS collecting going? And have you also put it on pause to focus on other things? Or are you still in the position where you're trying to snatch up the last few titles before you consider your collection complete. But that's it for this video, and until my next one.